Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, in your comments, you have kind of outlined what the government has done quite late in the game now to try and resolve the problems created by a Liberal government after 8 years. And so I want to ask you specifically on international students, now that there's a cap of 35% that you've placed on it, a reduction, does the department know how many international students today are homeless?
So first, just to qualify your comment, MP Kmich, this was a program that has been supported by many governments, including Conservative governments. The Harper government doubled the program. It's one that has, yes, gotten out of control. We don't track the homelessness rates of students.
So I'll take it that you don't know how many are homeless right now. So you don't know that, although there have been stories all over the country of international students who are either sleeping in their cars on campus. In fact, the Nova Scotia Community College CEO said in the pre-budget meetings in the fall that he had students calling every single day asking whether they could sleep in their cars on campus while attending their post-secondary institution. It's on the record there. You have tent cities. You have people basically saying that they have nowhere else to live, or 25 people living in a home, all while the department kept issuing international study permits to these students. They promised them one thing, had a different experience in Canada. So why did you allow that to keep happening over the fall?
Honourable Minister.
You know very well, MP Kmich, that education is in the jurisdiction of the provinces. Provinces regulate designated learning institutions. The only entity in this chain not making any money off it is the federal government. The provincial governments get their cut. The institutions get their cut. And we trusted provinces. We trusted designated learning institutions. And on seeing that this was getting out of control, we acted. And I think that's a very important thing to remember.
Are you saying you would have cared more if you were making money on it also?
That isn't the answer. My point is you talk about responsibility, but the responsibility is one that is shared by jurisdictions. And it is very simplistic to suggest that the federal government can simply turn on and off a tap and individually regulate institutions. Your own Conservative governments would be the first to complain about that.
You did not include work hour limits in the announcement. You said those were announcements going to be made into the future. Now you said in the opening statement that international students are not to blame for the housing crisis in Canada. That's probably the only part of your whole statement I agreed with, that little small sliver of a few words. There is media reporting that the government was actually warned. IRCC officials warned at the Immigration Department that there would be an impact on housing if the international student program was not changed. And that was 2 years ago to your predecessor. Actually, I have the article right here. The guy who's still moonlighting, this gentleman's still moonlighting as a senior immigration minister all across the country. And he was warned 2 years ago that if changes to the international student program were not made, it would lead to increased housing pressure. Have you seen those briefing notes and memos that the Canadian press is reporting on?
Honourable Minister.
As a clarification, am I to understand that you didn't agree with anything in the opening statement about what is happening in Canada? You can't be oblivious to these.
Are you going to answer my question?
Well, no, I'm just talking to you about...
Did you see the memo, Minister?
I have seen memo upon memo about international students, and under my authority, I have acted on that, and that is what I plan to do and plan to continue. It is clear that we have issues in and around affordability and the cost of shelter and the impact of volume generated by some concentrations of students in some areas. But my announcement, to be clear, was not one that was to deal with affordability. It was one
in the memo being quoted
integrity
here
in the
by
system.
the Canadian press, it says, waiving the cap would help alleviate labor shortages. A memorandum for the minister conceded, but it could also have other unintended consequences. It then continues to talk about other issues that would arise. The memo said, quote, give rise to further program integrity concerns with the international student program. Minister, will you commit today to instruct your deputy minister to release all of the memos and the briefing notes and the internal documents being referred to in the Canadian press article here that appeared, the CBC no less, on February 13th, 2024. The headline is, Minister was warned about possible negative impacts of lifting international student work limit. Will you release them to this committee?
What I can say about this process and the process of decision-making is ministers are often briefed on a number of risks, the pros, the cons, everything in between, and we take a decision in light of that. I believe that the decision of my predecessor was the right one in the context, And then we have another decision
Chair,
that we must take
the minister,
in reducing
what are you
those
hiding,
hours
Minister? I'm
in the
asking you
coming
just to
months.
release the memo. Are you going to release the memo on the
Honourable-
I'm not
documents of this
going to
committee?
undertake at this time to
Honourable
release that
member,
information.
I
Tom.
will make sure that you get your time and let the minister respond, and I'll come back to you. Minister, go ahead, please.
I'm not going to undertake at this time to release those memos.
Because, Chair, the minister is hiding. He's not wanting to release the same documents that the media has access to and won't release it to all the members of this committee. Bloomberg, another media outlet is now reporting, they've compared the international student program, quote, to student trafficking. The very first line of this article says, Canada's radical immigration experiment. And it quotes you, Minister, saying, people are being exploited. Is this then your fault?
Look, I believe there is blame to share across jurisdictions.
Sorry, Minister, are you accepting blame for the situation? Are you saying your department and you have made decisions that have exploited international students?
That isn't what I answered, and you know exactly what I answered, Tom. I have said from time and time again that there is plenty of blame to go around. The primary responsibility for the quality of the education system are provinces. We trusted provinces. They did not live up to that trust, and now we are clamping down. I think that is the right thing to do.
Minister, then, do you believe that Bloomberg is accurately reporting on the state of the international student program in Canada, that it is indeed student trafficking, and again, quoting from the article, Canada's radical immigration experiment is an accurate reflection of your government's policies after 8 years?
Minister, time is up. Please.
There's clearly challenges with the integrity of the system, MP Kmeech. It is not the entire portrait of it. We do have some of the best and brightest students that we attract and compete with competitive jurisdictions about bringing them in. It is still a program that we can be quite proud of, but it does have abuses and at times has been a backdoor entry into Canada, and that's why we are taking these measures, which I believe are reasonable, and putting them into place. And that is something that I look forward to working with provinces and the institutions themselves so that we can live up to a visa program that was intended to attract excellence in the first place.
Mr. Berthold for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Mr. Miller. You will agree with me, and this is the first time that I've met you here in committee, but we've often spoken about immigration. The situation is absolutely dire in the various ridings. We're spending half of our time settling problems that were caused either by delays, errors on the forms. There are an increasing number of foreign students who come to our offices, and yet we should be able to have recourse to immigration services offered by the Immigration Department. Most of my cases are of federal jurisdiction that should be settled by the department. Unfortunately, the system is in dire straits. How do you explain your predecessor's fiasco? With all due respect, and coming from the riding that is probably the busiest in Quebec, I understand your situation. I've seen it for the past 8 years. This isn't restricted to international students. It's mainly in May that we see students at our door. We are not the place of first resort. It's really people who are desperate, people who want to renew their visa. The problem is the volume. But how do we deal with this? Well, I'm not going to go back on what happened in the past. Well, Quebec was responsible for international students. It doesn't mean that there aren't any problems in Quebec. Look at the acceptance rate, look at the number of asylum seekers from the Quebec universities. It's quite a high number, but Quebec was responsible. The fact remains that there are a number of students, when they try to renew their visa, face challenges. We are trying to look at that. If you step back a bit, the student visa program is well managed in terms of the time frame. The problem is because there's so much influx. If you look at one part of the immigration that has problems, it wouldn't be this particular facet of it. It's not this program in general, but you have to say that generally there has been a fiasco here. You said yourself that in the past 3 years there's been exponential growth. There is some shared responsibility here. You said that it has been shared between the provincial and federal governments. So what is the federal government's share of responsibility here? There was a student from India who said that his request for accommodation was that his main fear in that was he wouldn't be able to find housing. How could you let things go? How could your predecessor let a situation get so bad? With all due respect, if an international student comes with $20,000 or $30,000 to show financial independence, I would say that the responsibility is the institution that welcomes that student, and then the province, and then the federal government. We do have a role to play, yes, a shared role when it comes to housing. And there are a lot of initiatives being taken, including at University of Laval and UBC, to invest in student housing.
Your time, so let the minister finish, and I will respect your time. Minister, go ahead.
Franchement, on est troisième sur la liste pour s'occuper.
Well, basically, we're third on the list to take care of student housing. It's not to say that we don't have any role whatsoever. We can certainly help provinces make investments. Who is responsible for issuing visas, Mr. Minister? Are you talking about issuing visas? It's very important, and that is why we are assuming a greater share of the responsibility, but it is mainly a provincial matter. Education is of a provincial jurisdiction. Now, are visas of federal or provincial jurisdiction? Well, listen, it's a very simple question that I'm asking. I am trying to ensure that there is housing for students. Minister, I know it's very difficult.
Stage, so I can acknowledge you fellows.
Okay.
Then it's easy on the interpreters, and I will respect your time. If you raise your hand, I will certainly acknowledge you. Okay, honourable member, go ahead, please.
Monsieur Miller, une question.
I have a simple question for you, Mr. Miller. Who is responsible for issuing student visas in Canada? The federal government is responsible for issuing student visas within an international study program. And who is responsible for the fact that the number of visas has gone from 350,000 to 1 million? It's not François Legault. Well,
C'est pas le premier ministre avec lequel je suis le plus près.
that is not the premier that concerns me the most, thank you, but we certainly relied on the institutions and the provinces who sent us visa requests. And with the new measures, we are asking them to take on and shoulder the responsibility for them.
Sir, no long answer, no long question though. Time is up.
Monsieur Miller, vous avez dit que...
Mr. Miller, you said in a Bloomberg article, it said that students were being exploited. You said you had shared responsibility for this. I would like you to put your predecessor in the hot seat. These people should not be viewed as people who are abusing. We all have a responsibility to shoulder, but bear in mind that when it comes to people who have made money on the backs of those people, the federal government made nothing, and the provinces made perhaps 1,000, and institutions who have made 60 or 70,000 on the backs of these international students.